New analysis today of the fallout from Charlie Kirk's killing and how the public's reaction may say it all.
The Kirk assassination this week has held up a mirror on our country right now, and it's not a pretty picture, right? The governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, just said on your air that he wonders whether or not this is the end of a dark period or another step toward an even darker period. And the reaction, what happened in the days after, even the hours after the assassination, indicates that it's not the end of a dark period. The country did not come together.
Joining me now, Jenna Arnold, Democratic strategist and author of the Substack The Land of And, along with political commentator Ashley Pratt Oates and Republican strategist and MSNBC political analyst Susan Del Percio. Welcome to all of you. So, Susan, is even the reaction to Kirk's killing exposing how polarized this nation is right now? Are we more divided than we've ever been recently?
We certainly are, Alex. And the one place that is just so disturbing is that it's happening even more with our younger people. And we can't undervalue the importance that Charlie Kirk had to college students and young folks, because he was the only one who really went out there and really sought to communicate with them. And this also happens to be the generation that grew up with gun drills in their schools. So it's very interesting to me to see how much we, as kind of the established older generation, have ignored those needs and shown that we are just no better than we were a week ago.
So, Jenna, there's unfortunately been multiple instances of political violence in recent years. Why is it that Kirk has received this response? I mean, Susan just touched on the fact that he went out to the young people and he was soliciting their presence and talking with them in conversation. But how well known was he even by the general public before this?
Well, it's a fascinating question. And then I would push it just a step further, because that's how I'd like to answer it, which is how well known was he amongst his constituency or the folks that he was trying to reach? What's been so fascinating to me about the response to this current tragic moment is how it seems like folks that represent some of his different target demographics are coming out of the woodwork trying to clarify exactly who he was or what he stood for. So I'm seeing a lot of chatter online from Christian communities trying to clarify some of the things that he said or didn't say that were aligned with their faith-based values. I'm seeing a lot of chatter, obviously, about how he was aligned from a racial or socioeconomic or power-based system. And it seems like a lot of people, a lot of folks outside of his just core audience are like, wait, who is this guy and who did he stand for? And it felt like there was a good 24, 48, even 72 hours where people were trying to really understand his story and his beat. And I think that goes to what the governor of Utah was saying, is that these algorithms have pigeoned us in such dangerous ways that there's, a lack of clarity across the board.
So, Ashley, meanwhile, Trump gave an exclusive interview to NBC News this weekend saying that he would like to see the nation heal. But then he says, quote, "But we're dealing with a radical left group of lunatics and they don't play fair and they never did." I mean, I was going to ask you if there was a mixed message there, but yeah. And how might the president better calibrate as this evolves? What can he do?
I think our democracy is in such a fragile state, Alex, that there really needs to be a moment of unity here rather than a moment of further division. And I think it's so imperative that all of our policymakers take this opportunity to unite the country rather than divide it further. And I think we're living in a time of extreme polarization, as was mentioned by all the guests today. But politics at its core used to be a space, and at least was when I was in college, where you could argue and disagree with someone, but walk away knowing that that person is a human being and maybe even a friend. And
so
that has just evolved in a completely different way.
Why? But why?
Because I think the polarization that's out there, there's this us versus them mentality, and it exists on both sides, and that is to our own detriment. We do not see people as human beings anymore, and that is a fundamental, I think, issue that our country has. And in order to move forward, we need to find the commonalities that unite us rather than the divisions and honestly the differences that continue to divide us. But the more we stay siloed and the more that we continue, again, to find those divisions rather than unite our country, the deeper we fall into this era of political violence that we are now in. So
But look,
I don't know how to fix it, but we need to start having these conversations.
So look, it's a huge issue, Susan, and it's greater than one person to fix, clearly. But does messaging by this president make each side want to dig in their heels even more?
Yes, and it makes each side decide to put blame on the other depending on the circumstance. And when anyone, at this point, Alex, anyone who is blaming, quote, the other side are part of the problem. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's someone on X who has 10 followers or someone who's on Truth Social who has 1 million. You are part of the problem if you're blaming. I would love to say this is a great time for unity. It won't happen. But maybe, just maybe, if we could stop blaming and just take that as the win and moving forward. And the other, we asked, like, why does this happen? What are we seeing in our elected officials? And when it comes to political assassinations, plural, let's highlight that, plural. It's that right now, everything is under a microscope. And Governor Cox was right when he talks about the dangers of social media. But social media in itself can be good. But it's those who are using it, who are so safe in their seats, who can go on the extreme of either side, know they don't have to worry about an election, which is the majority of folks in the House, by the way, and Senate, and they can continue to go on to get the clicks, to raise the money, to have influence. And it's those folks, again, it is, in fact, on both sides that they use this to their advantage instead of taking care of the people they are supposed to represent, Alex.
I can tell Jenna wants to jump in here.
Yeah, I would double click on the idea that it's everybody's responsibility here. I mean, we have, as a country, both in politics and in parenting, have raised generations to believe that winning and silencing and controlling a debate is actually the metric of success. We have no musculature in this country to actually ask clarifying questions. I've spent the past 10 years of my life trying to figure out how we're going to bring each other back together. And it's certainly not by delivering another data point. And it sits in conversations and questions rooted in, tell me about a life experience that's helped you believe that perspective, or centering that, wow, I'm really afraid. I'll never forget, I was debating Sarah Palin right before the election, this past election, and we were talking about reproductive rights. And I said to her on air, I'm really afraid of that perspective. That makes me so uncomfortable. It doesn't just come down to the numbers. And in the break and then in the green room for hours afterwards, she kept asking, but why are you so afraid? And in that, centering my vulnerability and my fear and my humility, I was able to open up Pandora's box about what that kind of fear might be for so many people outside of my specific demographic even. So the left is as responsible for fact wars, trying to silence others, the othering. I'm willing to very publicly, obviously, say that I'm part of the problem too. I go on right-leaning outlets and I try to deliver blows, and I have been successful. That's certainly subjective. So it's the way that we talk to our kids, to the way that we talk to our sisters, to the way that we talk to people sitting in the pews with us, that this has to be an overall transition from the way that we behave. And I think it's a reflection of our insecurity and how we've devalued ourselves, or the role that our intellect or our interpretation of our own intellect plays in all of this. But nothing anyone's going to say is actually going to move the needle. You have to root it in vulnerability, fear, and emotions.